It's good to see you on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, morning. I've been enjoying listening to the talks.
It's been a really interesting session. I have to say I've learnt lots myself about the programme from Paul, and it's been really fascinating to hear about the experience of our trainees. A great session so far. Now, broadly, Malcolm, what we wanted to do today was think about how students might go about the process of applying to the Academic Foundation programme, how students, new F1s, might get the best from the programme, and then, of course, how they may progress further in the academic career pathways if they choose to. And there's been a lot of questions in the Slack room around the application process and some of those specific questions. But actually, one of the things I was thinking about, the first question that a student needs to make is, needs to ask themselves, is research for me? And I was going to ask you how you decided research was for you, and particularly how you came about to be in paediatric respiratory related research. Tell us a little bit about some of your choices there.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I think I first became interested in research really when I was a medical student, which is obviously a bit of a time ago now. But I was able to do quite clinically based projects when I was a student that I actually really enjoyed. And I think it was about perhaps having that time to really get involved in something in more detail, which I think is still can be an issue as an undergraduate in terms of what research lets you do is really truly get involved in something and perhaps get to know the people that you're working with that a little bit better than you do during a lot of usual attachments. And I found that I just actually enjoyed the process of really getting involved in the detail of something. What there didn't used to be was the integrated academic training pathway, which I think is genuinely a fantastic thing.
Yeah.
Because what someone like me did was kind of undertake projects during their clinical training. And I did a variety of different projects to kind of bolster my CV, if you like. What's always been crucial, I think it still is crucial, is kind of seeing projects through and making sure that the outputs from them are realised. For example, presentations and publications. And then I was able to build up my CV and then actually take 3 years out of programme to do a PhD. And it was at that time that I really became, I guess, heavily involved in paediatric respiratory research and realised that I could combine the research with my clinical interests. And marrying those two together, I think, is just an amazing privilege that clinical academics get to be able to do. And so you can have that motivation and that interest in a disease because you deal with people who have it, and then explore those ideas in your research as well, hopefully by trying to improve outcomes for patients ultimately. And that's the kind of pathway that I followed. And after doing a PhD, I then became a clinical lecturer because by that time the integrated academic pathway had been invented, and I was able to become a clinical lecturer and then at a consultant level continue being an academic basically.
Yeah, so I think you made a couple of interesting points that I can resonate with as well. One of which being taking having some research opportunity or additional experience during medical school, and I similarly had an undergraduate course at Cambridge where in my third year I had a full year of a particular subject and had a dedicated project during that time. And I really enjoyed the opportunity to get to grips with a particular area and explore particular research questions and be part of that small research team. Do you think, I think one of the things with the Academic Foundation programme is that many students might be a little anxious that they haven't got past research experience whenever they're thinking about applying for AFP. Do you think that's a problem? Do you think that's a barrier to applications?
Yeah, I don't think it should be an absolute barrier at all. Obviously, I think by definition, most academic programs tend to be reasonably competitive. So it's certainly true that planning early and trying to work on your CV is always a sensible thing to be doing.
Yeah.
But I personally don't think there should be absolute barriers, because I think at an early stage of career, what's more important than anything, I think, is enthusiasm to undertake research, enthusiasm and hard work, essentially. But it's certainly wise, people listening who are perhaps early on during their student careers as a medical student, to be thinking ahead and trying to sort of take the most of any opportunities that may be available, to undertake projects and thereby try and improve their academic CV, if you like.
I think that's really sound advice, actually, Malcolm. Really sound advice. I mean, something that struck me from your career path and Will's path is that you seem to have quite a clear idea right from the outset as to the type of research, the type of clinical area you'd like to work in. I guess my own experience is perhaps I took on a PhD because I was keen to do something different, and it was serendipity that allowed me to pursue a PhD in pediatric immunology. There was a post available, and I applied for it, but it was perhaps less directed as yours. But once I started that research program, it hooked me, and I've wanted to stay in research ever since. But I think there is a point about for trainees and students starting out in the academic career pathway, they don't have to know what specialty they want to be in, do they, really?
No, absolutely. I think what's probably crucial, and having mentors who can, and supervisors who can provide advice. I think that is so important.
Yeah, no.
Stage, really, because those are and having the right sort of mentors who can genuinely encourage and provide the kind of right and appropriate advice is important. But I think limiting yourself at a very early stage to a very specific area within a subspecialty, for example, for research it's actually probably unrealistic, actually. And people should go with their own ideas and what they enjoy and what interests them, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, actually. So I think we've talked about sort of why students might consider research. If you've got a curiosity about asking questions, if you want to try something different, this might be the program for you. This specialty is something that can evolve over time. Trainees will learn some generic academic skills during the course of their AFP. So those are really important basic questions to consider. I mentioned at the start that a lot of the comments we've had and questions in Slack chat have been around the application process, and many of the academic units of application have white space questions. And I was going to draw on your thoughts as to how applicants might make the most of those white space questions. How can they sell themselves best, do you think?
Yeah, no, so that's a really good question. And I think it takes time actually to write these sort of applications. I think we all find them challenging. I guess perhaps a good piece of advice is to try and put yourself in the seat of the person who's going to be reading potentially several hundred applications.
Yeah.
It's always sound advice to make it as easy as possible for the reader. So it has to come across clearly, whatever point you're trying to make. I think naturally most of us enjoy hearing kind of human stories and examples. So in effect, by personalizing what's spoken about, immediately interests most people, actually. So trying to weave in genuine, authentic examples of perhaps projects that you've been involved with can only make it come to life, really.
Yeah.
These sort of applications, especially where they're relatively open questions, I think they just can't be rushed the night before the deadline. It's another important piece of advice. Yeah. And they just need to be really carefully written.
Yeah,
But there's something about getting the general points across, but then having specific examples that will make it easier to score the points when someone's perhaps having to read a lot of applications and to score them fairly.
Yeah. I think that's very fair, and I suppose we do have to acknowledge it's quite a competitive process. Yeah. So your point about prior thinking, planning, and drafting of the white space questions are well made. Being clear, having examples. The other things to add would be about showing that you have had past experience, or you can reflect on what opportunities you've had and how to share those experiences on your application, and demonstrate commitment. So what area of what discipline, what area, what academic thinking you've made ahead of applying to the academic foundation program. If you can make contact with a supervisor, so that you're already thinking about potential project areas, maybe not specific, but project areas, can certainly let the reader know that you are a committed individual who is very keen to have the opportunity.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and by having made that contact and thought about projects, and I don't think we're talking about huge amounts of detail, but having thought about projects, it's actually much easier to write and fill those sort of white space questions anyway.
Yeah, no, totally. The other part of the application, of course, is the interview, and trainees are interviewed for the AFP. The same question, what sort of tips might you have to perform best at interview?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think it's tough, isn't it, for anyone? I think there's a certain knack to staying calm.
Mm.
So
I have to say.
Staying calm and just thinking about the question that you've just been asked.
Yeah.
I think what helps with that is practicing. I think that's sound advice. So just trying to do as many practice or mock interviews as possible can only help on the actual day.
Yeah.
Having sat on a few different panels, I think what tends to kind of annoy people who are posing the questions is if someone clearly doesn't answer the question that they've just been asked, and I know we see politicians do this all the time on TV, and it probably annoys viewers. So it's about trying to think about the question that you've been asked and then calmly answer it. And again, a bit like the white space questions, if you can actually then weave in some specific examples based on your application form or your experience, I think that only impresses panels, really.
Yeah.
And it can often be fairly obvious if someone's enthusiastic and knowledgeable. Within the first couple of minutes of them entering an interview, there can be quite radical differences between individuals. And part of that is just through having prepared.
Yeah, I would totally agree, and I would just echo your comment about the trainee or the student who is enthusiastic, that they're coming to the panel really wanting to be there and demonstrating an enthusiasm for the application, for the post, where in some of their white space questions they might have demonstrated commitment. They're coming to an interview similarly reflecting on their interests, but that enthusiasm, I think, is really important. The other point that Alex made in the Slack chat, which we should probably just flag as well, is that the interview is likely to include clinical questions as well as academic type questions. So applicants should be aware of that. And I think Alex has pointed folk to the Oxford Handbook of Clinical Medicine just to brush up on some of the acute scenarios as well. So it is a combination in AFP of clinical questions as well as academic type questions.
And certainly in ACF interviews, which I have more experience of, often people will be given some sort of paper to read and potentially kind of present a piece of data and talk about it.
Yeah.
which people are given on the day. And obviously you can only prepare to a certain extent about that, but just doing your own research and to know that you may be asked to do that kind of thing, rather than being, incredibly shocked on the day when you're handed something to read 15 minutes ahead of your interview, just to try and do the background research before the day can only be a sensible thing to be doing.
So there is a common thing of preparation, really, isn't there? Absolutely. One of the questions in our Slack chat was around where to apply for an academic foundation program, whether one should stay close to the home medical school or whether one should think about applying elsewhere for a completely new opportunity. Do you have any feeling yourself as to which might be a preferred option?
I think you just have to do what feels right. Actually, I don't think there are right or wrong answers to that question. I can think of I've supervised an academic foundation doctor who moved to the region for the program, and I think they found it quite refreshing actually to come to a different centre. I think there are some differences between the individual programs as well in terms of how the academic time is sort of dished out and how it's worked out over the 2 years. So I think reading about that, and if you have strong feelings about the way you'd like the time to be sort of split, that may influence where people may wish to apply. But no, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer about where.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think Paul made the same point about looking at the individual programs. There's a huge variety in the differing types of programs and the offer. Some are more structured, some are less structured. So making that decision in the context of what the particular foundation school and how they present their AFP program is really important. I should just mention that we're having a really nice chat about some of the key themes around the AFP programme. But if folk wish to pose further questions in the Slack chat, it will be open. Please do use Twitter. Please contact FDocs, and we'll be happy to pick up those questions after the event, of course. Matt gave a really nice reflection on both highs and lows of the programme. And as I said at the beginning, I'm so impressed with some of the stories that our presenters have shared and their own experiences today. But I think there were a couple of important points to pick up around some of the lows and the challenges of the programme, in that it is more self-directed than the clinical posts. It can be lonely at times, and you can have quite short periods to achieve a meaningful research activity. Those are important points, aren't they? Any thoughts on those?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think inevitably academic medicine and research involves hard work, and there are always going to be some low points as well. I think personally that in actual fact any trainee should never actually be feeling particularly alone. I know we all do at points, but in any program there really should be a system whereby an individual is not just left to it. I think it's crucial. It probably comes back to the relationship with supervisors and program directors, but I think any responsible supervisor should not be expecting someone who is inevitably at an early stage of their career to just get on with it, if you like. I think that the days of that being acceptable have actually passed a long time ago. So I would like to think that people should always feel supported. And obviously research groups vary a lot in terms of the work that they do and how they operate. But what a lot of people find is actually this one of the strengths is sort of joining a group of like-minded individuals doing similar work. And there can be genuine camaraderie there, the way there is amongst junior doctors in clinical posts. But I guess probably a common theme to doing academic work is being motivated and having that degree of self-motivation. And I think that is kind of inevitable. But people who apply for academic foundation programs tend to be a self-selecting group in that you have to be fairly motivated to be applying. So I would sincerely hope that the highs outweigh the lows considerably. And each program really should have and will have a structure in place to support people if they're genuinely feeling isolated.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Malcolm. And actually, my own experience of working in academia is these are small teams, small groups where you get to know your supervisor and other members of the team really well. So there's considerable support available to trainees. The other point that I think Matt made was around managing expectations, and a practical point our piece of advice I would give would be about managing one's own expectations and making sure that whatever piece of work you set out to do is focused and achievable within the time frame. And again, that discussion with your supervisor will hopefully make sure that that is the case. Well, thanks ever so much for joining us. Really enjoyed your presentation. And Malcolm and I have been picking up just some of the key themes about why to go into research, what type of specialty, and some of the issues around process and how best to sell yourself. From your own experience, have you got any thoughts yourself as to whenever you reflect back on your applications for ACF and ACL, because that's a question that trainees and students have posted on the Slack chat as to how to maximise their presentation. How did you sell yourself in your ACF and ACL application? What tips might you have for some of the people listening today?
It's a good question. So I think in terms of selling yourself, it's hard, because I think I after I got my post, I was speaking to some of the panel members later in a social setting and saying, out of interest, why did you pick me? And it was a very vague answer I was given. And I think what I took from it is, I don't think they have a checklist of criteria. I think they want someone who has something unique about them, or something that makes them stand out, or a sense that they've got a passion for it. I don't know. I think maybe the ability, demonstrating the ability to show a sustained interest and to take your own direction. And I think I don't think there's specific things to tick, but maybe just find out what it is that you've done in your history and in your career so far, however small, bearing in mind this is all, at the stage you're applying, you won't have done very much probably, but just try and identify what are the things that reflect you or make you stand out from other people, or demonstrate some sort of drive over and above just following the normal path, really. The other thing that really helped, and in terms of sort of picking AFPs, ACFs, projects and everything, is the very clear tip is find a good supervisor, a good person to work with. It does need to be an area that captures your interest, but you may not know whether it captures your interest for some time after working in it. But you need a good supervisor, because you need so much more than a good project. You need career advice, you need support for the next steps if it goes well, for alternatives, and someone who cares and takes an interest if it doesn't go well, someone who you get on with, who will help you express and develop your own ideas. So I think if you're thinking of applying, speak to the people, identify a short list of the people you might work with, meet them, talk to them. Don't be presumptuous, but talk about what you might do, how it might look if you got the post. And I think if you can see yourself fitting into that and you feel passionately, I'd love to do this, that will come across at the interview and in your application.
I think those are really good points, and resonate with the conversation that Malcolm and I had a while ago. I think you've also flagged a point that both Alex and Matt made in their talks about non-academic activities and how important they are in terms of adding to you as an individual when you come to an interview, to demonstrate some of those professional skills and some of that self-directedness that you're referring to that make you stand out from the crowd. And of course, Alex very nicely described what how variable and how diverse his activities were during his AFP program, which is another nice selling point coming to an interview. So it's the project, but there's much more than just your project whenever you're coming to an interview. It's the individual, it's the other activities, that enthusiasm, the different activities that you've done, as well as some of those attitudes that you referred to as well. And of course, you make a really valid point about that every medical career is never straightforward, and that there will be kind of stones and obstacles along the way, and having that supervisory support right from the outset is really important. Yeah, absolutely. One of the points, as we maybe just round off today's discussion, Paul made right at the start, was that you don't necessarily need to do AFP to progress along an academic career pathway. So maybe just start with Malcolm again as to, in terms of for those that can see themselves pursuing a career in academic medicine in the next 5 years or more. So do you have any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. In that you can apply for an ACF post having not done an academic foundation program. So that is a really important message, isn't it? Inevitably, as we've spoken about, most ACF posts are relatively competitive. So it is so important to have tried to optimize your CV, to have kind of completed projects that you may have been involved with, trying to be associated with the outputs from projects, etc., which then just makes it so much easier to write that application and I guess to score points on the application as well. But yeah, you don't need to have been an academic foundation doctor to have taken part in projects, to have perhaps done some presentations, perhaps generated to be an author on some publications. That can absolutely still be done. And people can start trying to do that as a medical undergraduate, certainly, and as a foundation doctor who's perhaps undertaking more clinical-based research during their clinical posts as an F1 or F2. Yeah,
perfect. And Will, maybe one of the final comments should go to you, really, as a previous AFP trainee. If you could do it again, would you still do academic foundation program?
Oh, no hesitation at all. I absolutely would do it. And I completely reiterate the point. You don't need to do an AFP to get on an academic career. But I think if you're thinking of an academic career, you'd be mad not to apply. I don't think there's a good reason not to. You don't need to technically to do an ACF either, but the reality is you need something before you apply for a PhD training fellowship. You need pilot data experience, because you need to show in the application to the interview that you have generated this research idea, it's thoroughly thought through and it's workable, and you've demonstrated your potential to do it. So there's no way you can do that without some experience. So AFP or ACF can be enough. The two together, better but not essential. But as you say, you can cobble together, you can get or amass research experience as an undergrad. You might even squeeze a bit in on the side in a clinical program. I think it gets very hard, but it's doable. But yeah, I'd apply, and you'd absolutely apply. And for me, it was the beginning. That's what set everything into motion. So it's very difficult to imagine what my position would look like now had I not done it, really.
Yeah. No, fantastic. So I think essentially a great program, lots of opportunities. Students need to make contact with foundation schools, think about which program suits them best, make contact with the supervisor, because that individual is pivotal for the planning and their support throughout their academic placements, and give it your best shot. Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, do email us via the FDocs email address. Do use Twitter. Do use the Slack chat room, and we can continue the conversation afterwards. But I think for now, my thanks to all of the speakers today. It's been great to hear your own reflections and your advice on the programme. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today elsewhere. Many thanks.
Hi, so my name's Zaid. I am an F1 in West London, and I just completed the Medics Academy training in teaching day 3 course.
I think it's structured in a really nice way with a lot of resources you can permanently access. The course isn't over after 3 days. You've got a ton of online content that you can always revisit, and I think that is fantastic.
I thought it was a great way to learn through having a full day at the start and then 2 later days of self-study. It really allowed for flexibility and allowed us to fully engage in the course.
It also made me feel better prepared to deliver teaching remotely or digitally.
It's really interactive. There's a lot of small group feedback session, exchanging ideas and learning people's perspective.
After actually doing this course, I realised that teaching is more of a science, and it's really important to get clear feedback so that you can improve your teaching.
This course also encouraged me to think thoroughly about what my audience actually wants from my teaching session, and also how I can keep them better engaged.
Really great and fantastic to get such fantastic lectures from experts in the field throughout the 3 days. It was also interesting to learn from others taking part on the course because we all have different levels of experience, so it was interesting to gain their perspective on things too.
I learned not just about different style of teaching, I also learned about what is medical education, how to build a career in medical education.
Overall, I learned a lot from the teaching course.
I think it's a really well done course.
I really enjoyed it.
And I really found it very enjoyable.
That's what I thought of the whole course, and I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to other people.
So thank you for letting me participate.